Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to welcome Colonel Bill Lair.
Good evening. I'm very happy to be here to see all of my old Hmong friends. When I graduated from college in 1950, I was recruited by the CIA. Nobody had ever heard of the CIA before. It was a brand new organization. And I went through training there, and then they sent me to Thailand. And they told me that the U.S. now has, the Army is small. We don't have the troops to send all over the world, so we want you to go to Thailand and teach the people how to fight guerrilla warfare. You know, which for a young man to go over there is a pretty large order, I thought. And so I went. And then I met a Thai general who was the head of the border police. And he liked me. And I was trying to do something, so he said he would support me 100%. You can train my people. So I started recruiting a group of young Thais, because we set up a regular training. And as they went through, I picked out what I thought were the best. And the general let me do whatever I wanted. And I started training that group, and then we went out to recruit more people. So we went to the border areas of Thailand, where they were close to the border but had a high school. So we could recruit the boys from the country. But if they lived close to the border, they could usually speak the language of the adjacent country and train them. And then we set up a program of them walking the entire border of Thailand, especially in the remote areas. And the thing that impressed me about those remote people is that they were at the mercy of anyone who came along with a gun. So if the communists came, they would have to cooperate with them. So I started putting these Thai teams that we trained with along the border to help those people, and we trained them and gave them some arms to protect themselves. And then one day I was up, we dropped supplies along the border to these various teams, and I was flying in the plane listening to the BBC on the radio in the plane, and I heard that the Crowne coup in Laos. So I thought, this is the opportunity that I've been waiting for. So I stayed in the plane. They flew into Bangkok. I went to the U.S. Embassy and to see what the U.S. was going to do about that. What happened in Laos? Well, you know, nobody knew what to do. They were sending messages to Vientiane, the CIA station, sending messages back to the U.S. Nobody knew what to do, so I waited a while to see what's going to happen. And then one day they said, I found out, and they knew that General Pumi, when Kong Lee made the coup, he was in Luang Prabang at some sort of a meeting. And he had a C-47 airplane with him, so he flew directly to Samanakhet, did not land in Vientiane. And he had 5 battalions in Samanakhet. So, but at that time, all of the money that belonged to the Lao government was in banks in Bangkok, because nobody trusted the banks in Laos. Or maybe they didn't even have one, I don't know for sure at that time. So, I heard him say one day that we must send the money from that account in Laos, in Bangkok, that belongs to Laos. We must send the money to him to pay those 5 battalions, or they'll go home. They still didn't know what they really wanted to do or what was going to happen. So I'd never met General Pumi at all, but I immediately said, please let me deliver the money. So I flew in a small plane to Samanakhet, And that come in, gave him, and of course I knew I'd be welcome if I came with a bag full of money. and so I asked him, what will you do now? Well, he said, I've got to take these 5 battalions and retake Vientiane. So I said, I have trained these Thai teams, small teams, and I said, each team has a medical technician and a radio. They have excellent communication. So I said, do you have medical technicians? He said, no. Do you have communications? No. I said, well, we can do that for you if you let me put a team with each one of your battalions. So he was very glad to do it. And so then they went back, they took Vientiane, then I went to Vientiane. But I already knew who the Hmong were. I met the Hmong in Thailand, and I had studied the Hmong in Laos, because the Hmong were such a free, independent people, lived on the mountains, did not want anybody to control them. So I know that these would be the perfect guerrillas. They knew how to walk in the mountains like nobody else. They could move in the mountains, and you'd think they had helicopters. They could go so far in one day. So I kept looking at one, and I just went up to Vientiane. I had my teams up there with me, 5 teams, and finally one day I saw the pilot who had flown me to Samana Camp. Oh, he said, I met General Vang Pao today. He said he told me where he was at Tavian, a little town south of Plain de Char. And he said they sent me there because he wanted a plane to pick up some of his family and take them to Vientiane to get out of the difficulties. And 4 helicopters that belonged to the U.S. had just come in that day. So when I found this out, I went over and I saw that one of the pilots was around that helicopter. He said he had just flown that helicopter from a carrier in the sea down there. So I said, could I use this helicopter? No, he said, I can't fly in Laos. I don't have maps. I don't know anything. They have no navigation aids. I can't go. But anyway, I contacted the U.S. Embassy and asked them, could I use one of those helicopters? And they said, go ahead. So I went back to the pilot, and he was very unhappy because I said, look, I got a map. And I said, I've been here a long time. I know this country like the back of my hand. I've never been there either, of course. I didn't tell him, but I knew I could find it because I could read the map. In fact, my major was in geology, so I certainly knew how to read maps. And so he finally agreed to go. We flew up, and we went to Pak San, and then we flew up the San River, which went right by where Vang Pao was supposed to be located. So we flew up there. By the time we got there, it was starting to get dark. The pilot was worried, and they told me, don't stay overnight. You must come back here. But I had one of my 5-man Thai teams with me in the plane, in the helicopter. And they were the best people I ever worked with. They were brave. They would go anywhere because they knew they could take care of themselves no matter what happened. So when we started to land, I couldn't see that. I saw one person there, and he was a Hmong fellow. He was out there by where they had made that little area where the helicopter could land. And so we got out and ran over and talked to him and said, is Vang Pao here? Oh, well, he said he's around here somewhere. Well, it was getting dark. I knew I had to take off, so I asked my Thai team, would you be willing to stay here? Because they'd never met anybody there. They didn't have, but they said, sure, we'll stay. They weren't worried about anything. And we had great